Welcome to another episode of Uniting Utah, the podcast of the United Utah Party. I'm Richard Davis. I'm the party chair, and with me is Jim Bennett, who's our communications director. Good to see you again, Jim.
Good to see you.
You seem to be in a different place now. All those guitars.
Yeah, this is my home office. We've hung up all my guitars in the background. So
wonderful. How many do you have?
3.
Oh, those 3
there
guitars.
They are.
Okay.
One's a ukulele.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. Well, maybe we'll get a concert someday from you.
At some point.
And also Jeff Barden, who is a candidate for the United Utah Party for the state legislature. And Jeff is running in House District 43, and I'll let him explain where that is. But tell us a little bit about your background first, Jeff.
Okay. I'm Jeff Barden. I live in West Jordan. I've lived here for the past 27 years, and prior to that, lived 15 years in Magna, and before that, Salt Lake City. But I'm originally from West Virginia and then North Carolina.
Oh.
Where I grew up. So, but I've been in Utah for over 40 years now. I worked for the Utah Department of Workforce Services for 34 years, retiring 10 years ago. And in that job, I had several positions while I was there, and most of the time I worked in the unemployment insurance division, either as adjudicator, a compliance auditor, or program specialist. So I enjoyed that career. As such, being a federally funded agency, I wasn't allowed to be involved, or at least run for partisan political office. I could go as far as the level of delegate or precinct chair, but no higher. And I did do that for a number of years in the Republican Party as a delegate, both county and state, and I did serve once as a precinct chair. I wouldn't call myself the typical Republican activist because I was much more moderate than most of them. But anyway.
Tell us about your family.
I'm married, my wife Pam, and I've been married, it'll be 47 years next month.
Oh my goodness.
So quite a while. We have 3 children. One sadly passed away a few years ago, but a son who lives in San Francisco and a daughter who lives in Tooele. I have 2 grandchildren, one who belongs to my living son. She normally lives in Dallas, but she spends most of the summer in California with her dad. And then my grandson who lives in Sandy, and so they're both teenagers. And
So most of the family
doesn't have children. So.
Most of the family is nearby, huh?
Right.
Oh.
And
Great.
Let's see, since I've lived in West Jordan, I've served, for about a 20-year period, I served on several different committees or boards for the city of West Jordan. First, the General Plan Committee, and then the Board of Adjustment, and then the Design Review Committee. I presently serve on the Board of Directors of the large homeowners association, condominium community where my wife and I own property.
All those jobs nobody really wants to do.
Right. Yeah, it's been interesting. Of course, our meetings the last few months have been by Zoom also. So,
yeah. Well, that's the definition of public service, is to be willing to do jobs that nobody else wants to do.
Right.
So why do you want to add one more job to the list?
Well, it's, back in February, I got an email from Richard asking if I'd be interested, which
Go ahead, blame me. Everybody does.
You can cut that part out if you want. But, You know, after all these years, I thought it would be interesting and to run for public office. You know, there have been days when I wondered if I had taken the flight from sanity, but the, I've
We all,
always had a desire to, you know, be of service to my community, and I feel like those are the dues we need to pay for the freedoms that we enjoy in our country, and you know, the benefits of living in our respective communities.
explain to us why you're running with the United Utah Party.
Okay. Well, 3 years ago, when I first learned of the formation of the United Utah Party, I found that exciting because I had for some years wished that we could have a moderate or middle of the road party. And we just didn't have that. The two major parties were becoming more polarized, and I think this started really at least 20 years ago, more maybe in the 90s, but especially on the Republican side. But at any rate, you know, in 2018, you know, I attended the first precinct caucus with the United Utah Party, and then the county and state conventions, and was happy to become a part of it. You know, I think I registered, I'm pretty sure I registered United Utah back in 2018, but I think it somehow didn't take. And
We know about
apparently that's happened to more than one person. So I had to do it again, but
That happened to me too. There was an article about that. They were changing party registrations without telling people. So that happened to you as well.
Yeah, no, it happened to me too. Yeah.
So I feel like, you know, the United Utah Party is a movement that I want to be a part of, and we promote moderation and pragmatism and seeking solutions from all sides and working to trying to bring about parties working together, you know, and finding common ground solutions. And so that's you know, an approach that appeals to me.
Well, so if you were to be elected, what would be the issues that you're focused on that are animating your candidacy?
Well, one of them is, I believe, the state legislature in recent years, and maybe even for longer than that, has become unresponsive to the wishes and desires of Utah's voters. We saw evidence of that with the legislatures undermining the citizens' initiatives that were passed in 2018, you know, with respect to Medicaid expansion, and then another event was, you know, last December when the legislature passed the tax reform package and rushed that, generated basically a revolt by the citizenry with the, you know, successful signature gathering campaign to put a referendum on the ballot, which led to the legislature repealing that bill. But some of the comments that were made by some of the legislative leaders seem to indicate a certain amount of contempt for the voters for having forced them into that position. In any event, it would be my stance to always respect the will of the people with any initiative that vote to make more than very minor adjustments if they should be necessary. I recognize that initiatives are not the ideal way of passing legislation, but I believe that it's necessary that we have that process available. And I would favor reversing the trend of recent years to make that process, that has made that process more difficult for voters to get an initiative on the ballot. I think we need to move in the other direction and make it easier. Although I wouldn't go as far as how it is in California, however. But,
so
that's one issue.
yeah, other issues?
Yeah, I think, education funding is very important. Well, not just funding, but let me address the matter of how we're dealing with education during the pandemic as well. But first, regarding funding, I believe we need to significantly increase funding of education to the point where, well, I believe we should set a goal to get Utah out of last place in per pupil funding. And I don't necessarily think we have to increase taxes to do this, but we need to reallocate monies in the budget. I think less money could be spent in some other areas, but we need to also pay teachers more and show that we respect the teaching profession. I think it's been a problem both in Utah and in the country that teachers just don't have the same level of respect that they do in many other countries, such as in Europe. And I think I'd like to see that changed.
Okay, so
yeah,
just a final question here. If you won and became a state legislator, how do you think being a United Utah Party legislator would help you in terms of dealing with Republicans and Democrats?
Yeah, well, I believe that most of the Democrats and Republicans are beholden to the respective bases of their parties, and so many of them come from safe districts for one party or the other. More for the Republicans, obviously, but
Utah.
But I mean, if you're in Salt Lake City, it's safely Democratic, so you have to fear not being renominated more than not being re-elected. We have only a small number of swing districts, but as a member of the United Utah Party, I believe I could bring a fresh approach to the issues, but also be somebody that could serve as a liaison between the two parties to bring people together, where there are people in each party who may have ideas about how to address a particular issue where there's potential to come together and find common ground.
Good. Well, thank you very much. So House District 43, is it just West Jordan?
Yes, the boundary appears to be pretty much the same as the northern boundary of West Jordan. Southern boundary is 7,800 south, so it kind of cuts West Jordan in half.
Okay.
Except we only go to about 4,800 to 5,600 west. It's kind of a jagged line on the western boundary. Jordan River on the east.
Okay, good to know. Well, thank you very much for being with us, Jeff. Good to talk with you. Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you've been watching an episode of Uniting Utah. We hope to see you again later.